Just a couple bad weather fans representing New York, talking all things sports. Man, what could go wrong? We got Alex, who's a fan of the Knicks, and Mike of the Nets. The yin-yang of the tri-state, place your bets on the Yankees, Giants, Mets, or Jets. Yeah, you should listen if they're sparking your interest. If you made a vow to your team, don't break it. Bad weather fans is the relation.
We're joined by Ian Eagle, Nets on Yes, CBS, NFL on CBS, Westwood One, and starting in 2024, calling the Final Four. Love and Ian from all of my Nets days. So Ian, thank you very much for coming on Bad Weather Fans. We really appreciate it today.
Yeah, very honored. Very honored to be here. Mike, obviously our bond goes way back. I don't know about the 2-on-1 thing now with Alex. I feel badly that there's an inequity here based on our background together and a lot of Nets vibes. But Alex, I hope you understand. I'm equally honored to be on with you. Please don't think it's all because of Mike.
Well, I heard a rumor you were a Knicks fan first, right? And then you got radicalized, right?
Yeah, I mean, what happens in life? So I've been on Earth 54 years on Earth. This will be my 30th year calling Nets games in some form. So you start doing the math, you realize, oh, this is more than half my life has been associated in some way, shape, or form with this basketball team. But I grew up in Queens, and the Knicks were obviously a big part of New York sports, and Marv Albert was doing the games, and I was going to the Garden. I was fortunate enough to get seats here and there, occasionally a neighbor or my dad. But the strangest part about it for me, 1994, I woke up in the morning. I had just had a dream. I was recently married less than a year. And I told my wife, I just had the weirdest dream. I had a dream that we were at the Meadowlands and I was calling a net game, and my father was sitting in the stand. My father had never been to the Meadowlands in his life. And I said, I have no idea what this means. And literally 2 months later, I saw an article in the Post. Phil Mushnick wrote that Howard David would not be returning as the Nets radio announcer. And I started poking around. I made a couple calls that day. I ended up going to the Net offices the next day, dropping off a tape. And within 10 days of that appearing in the paper, I got the Nets play-by-play job. And obviously my life changed dramatically.
Wow. No, that's amazing. Was it jarring in a way? You know, like I grew up going to these Nets games and I didn't know better. Like when you hear Armin Gilliam score a basket and the Nets are playing Hammer Time, was it jarring going from like the Garden and the Knicks and then being in this arena where it was like 5,000 or whatever it was? Was it kind of, I mean, of course, the best opportunity of all time, but weird just being like, this is kind of different than the Knicks.
It was different. There's no doubt about it. I was so thrilled to be doing the games and to be getting play-by-play reps. It didn't matter. We could have been doing these games in Timbuktu. I would have been excited about it. But the first road trip of the season was the Texas Triad. So it's my first games as a Nets announcer, and it's Houston, San Antonio, Dallas. And Armin Gilliam could not have been a nicer guy and more approachable guy, the late Armin Gilliam, I should say. So I noticed on the first flight that he was reading. He was a big reader. And we end up in the same elevator after picking up the keys at the front desk in San Antonio up to our respective floors. So get in the elevator, it's just me and Armin. I said, hey, Armin, I'm Ian Eagle. I'm doing the Nets radio. He goes, oh, okay. I said, hey, I noticed you're a big reader. He goes, I am. You? I said, yeah, love it. Love to read. He goes, all right. You know, I'll loan you out some books. I go, you got it. Great. And we now get on the flight for the next part of the trip. And he comes to the back of the plane and he hands me a book and says, here you go. This is what I've been reading. You want to check it out? I go, yeah, 100%. Absolutely. And he hands it to me and it's the Bible.
It is a book.
So, whoa, this is a lot.
Right.
And I think I got like 6 pages in and I started to nod off at that point. And Armin was sitting, and we had a setup on the plane where some of the seats faced one another so guys could play cards or have a conversation. And he had like an angle to see me, and we wrapped up the flight. And he said, "What'd you think?" I go, "Oh yeah, no, a lot of good stuff in there. Definitely." He knew I didn't read it.
Touch it. That's great. That's great.
That's funny. So you've been calling games for a long time. One of the guys you've called is Richard Jefferson, who is now a colleague of yours. And
who's this?
Richard
I'm sorry.
Jefferson.
With an R? Is that with an R?
And a J? Yes, RJ.
R and a J.
Bald,
RJ.
yes. It looks like a cue ball a little bit. Yeah. He's been on the show a few times, and he actually said, and I quote, that he likes doing games more with Ryan Rucco than with you. What are your thoughts on that?
No. Do you have the clip? Play the clip. I don't.
No, I'm kidding.
I don't believe it.
I'm kidding. But how is it working with Richard Jefferson? I know he's a pain and he's fun, and we like to tease him a lot here, but how do you feel?
Yeah, I mean, in a word, I would say torturous. Probably is the one. No, he's a pleasure, and the fun part about Richard is you really do not know where he's going next. Mm-hmm. It is completely unscripted and fly by the seat of your pants. And I think part of the reason why he and I have gotten along so well, not only on the air, but off the air, high level of sarcasm. And then sometimes you can't tell when he's being serious and when he's not. And that can often get him into some hot water here and there, but he is impervious to it. He's not the least bit intimidated by the idea of tackling certain subject matters, and his credibility level is so high. Played in the league a long time, played in an extremely high level, won a championship, and really understands the game. So it's a blast. A lot of fun working with him. We do a 3-person booth sometimes with me, him, and Sarah, and we just laugh the entire game, whether it's on the air, off the air. We're constantly entertaining one another. And ultimately, I think, we could get into the process of play-by-play and how you approach it. And oftentimes, I think people don't need to know or care about how the sausage is made. But the reality is you want people that like one another working together. That does come across. It doesn't mean you have to be best friends with everybody that you work with, but you definitely have to find some commonality. So the fact that Richard is self-deprecating, that helps a great deal too. He doesn't take himself so seriously. He could. He made $100 million playing basketball and played at a ridiculously high level, but he doesn't. He doesn't look at it that way. He doesn't see his opinions are better than yours or more important than yours. And that's part of the reason why he actually is quite relatable in many ways.
Did he really go an entire year not eating French fries?
He did.
Claimed? Like obviously not there every second, but he really did it.
He did. I think he has that kind of willpower, and his brain is set up. It might be an all or nothing kind of mentality in life. And when he says he's going to do it, he's not bullshitting.
Right.
It's real. He won't do it. So did he then compensate in other ways? Yeah. I think his candy intake went up higher. But he did not eat fries that whole year. And there were times where we would buy fries and then just stick them right in front of the broadcast location. And he didn't bite. Impressive. So no, he's a man of his word. I will say that. The other part, and I've said this to him, so I'm not saying it out of school. I said, it's really exciting to work games with you, Richard, because we never know when it's going to be your last game. There's a very good chance that you might say something that ends it all. Mm-hmm. And then we get to experience that.
Yes.
Together.
Yeah. And
yes. Yeah.
I'll follow up. I'm hoping this might be like, and if you've heard it before, then you've heard it before, but one of the harder questions you'll ever get. And I've researched it. I'm really into this.
Okay.
If you could only call this for a net game for eternity, spillage on the court or wedgie when the ball is sandwiched between the rim and the backboard? You only get one.
Oh, man. I would say wedgie because it incorporates action. So it really is spontaneous. When it hits, it feels like an eclipse. The idea that an NBA player would get stuck in between the backboard and the rim, that happens to the common person, the layman. Why would it happen to the people playing at the highest of levels? So it really does feel like it's lightning striking. Spillage is based more, for me at least, this is what hit me. And I told our producer, Frank DeGrace, who is so excellent at his job and really has been the heart and soul of Nets broadcast for all of these years, because he's the constant. He's the consistent factor. The announcers may change. The combinations may change. Frank is the one that's always there. He's the staple. But I told him years ago that there were fans just to the left of me that just spilled their drinks. And his reaction was, okay. And I said, we should cover it because it's on the court. This is going to affect play. They're going to have to stop play. They're going to have to get the ball boy over there with towels, wipe it down, and 18,000 people and however many people are watching at home are now focused on these three people that dropped their drink. I just found it so hilarious that in a sporting event, and this is one of the only sporting events where it could happen, where it's literally fan participation. They have stopped the game. They have affected this event based on either a ball rolling towards them or their own personal clumsiness or drunkenness. So I just found it completely fascinating. And the fact that nobody ever covered it. They would cut away from it, in fact, and all right, let's talk about so-and-so, or let's show you the upcoming schedule. And I convinced Frank, and now he's all in. This is many years ago. He's all in. And I've noticed other announcers and other broadcasts have now leaned into it more. They've recognized if something wacky happens outside of the lines, but it affects what's happening on the court, it should be covered.
Well, you are a trendsetter then, I guess, Ian. You are a trendsetter. But
I think so.
A little bit more about the Nets before we get into the Knicks and some Jets as well. Now that the big three are gone, Kyrie, Durant, and Harden, obviously, is it nice to finally be calling games for like a quote unquote normal basketball team again?
You know, the interesting part for me, having been through every iteration of the Nets over the last 29 years, I don't look back at any chapter and say, oh man, I wish that didn't happen. I think it served a purpose. And for the Nets, there's no doubt that they were searching for credibility and trying to be a factor and trying to create some juice and buzz. And they went all in. They swung for the fences. I don't know how many other GMs or owners or fan bases would say when given those options, no, I'm not up for it. I'm not into it. I don't want some of the best players in the league on the same team. Now you get into chemistry, you get into behind the scenes machinations, and it wasn't smooth and it didn't result in a championship. But from a play-by-play person standpoint, strictly from that angle, it was a lot of fun. It was fun calling the games. There were a lot of highlights. There were a lot of high moments. And it forced you to be really good at your job, to be able to match what was happening on the court with your commentary. The downside of it was team was highly scrutinized, not always in a positive manner. And we didn't know how this wild ride was going to end. Now the smoke is cleared. You look at the roster, you look at the plan. The Nets have not hit the reset button. Sean Marks, Joe Tsai, the sides in general, made a determination that they wanted to remain credible, and they're going at it from a new perspective, which is, hey, we're going to just put together a bunch of young, really good guys that will lean into the defensive mentality and see if they can create something here. And build something with an affable group. It's no guarantee. This team very well could compete, and they could be middle of the pack, which we know in the NBA is not a great place to be because you're never quite bad enough to get the impact player through the draft, and you're never quite good enough to vie for a championship. We'll see. We'll see where this all ends up. But if you're asking me, is it a relief? And are you approaching the job differently? No. And maybe because I just have the benefit of experience and just doing this job for this particular team for so long. I've seen every possible type of situation where they've gone for it and where they've basically waved the white flag and said, hey, let the bottom drop out and let's try to start over. This one doesn't qualify in either one of those categories.
And then, Ian, from your perspective, calling all these Nets games in New Jersey, and I'm curious to tie in a Nick angle here. And from going to games my whole life in New Jersey, there was a lot of Nick fans that would come there. And I've said this many times, Net fans that declare, we're taking over the city and all this stuff. It's just about growth and the Nets building and getting to more, being a part of it a little bit more. From your end, I'm curious what you've seen from going to these games, like that difference in what it's like in a Net-Nick rivalry now that the Nets are in Brooklyn, and if it feels like there's a different sense than maybe there was in New Jersey.
Well, first of all, in New Jersey, when I started with the Nets, part of their marketing campaign, this was not just by happenstance, part of their marketing campaign was to sell the opposition. Mm-hmm. Come see so-and-so. Come see Akeem Olajuwon. Come see Clyde Drexler. Come see Michael Jordan eventually when he came back. That was part of the marketing campaign. So they recognized that they couldn't just sell their team. And that was coming off a stretch where the Nets were actually pretty good, a playoff team consistently under Chuck Daly, but couldn't quite get over the hump. In fact, the year that I joined on was 94. That year, they had lost to the Knicks in the first round. Kenny Anderson got injured. Ramil Robinson stepped in. And then Chuck Daly left, went into television, and eventually took the Orlando Magic job. And Butch Beard took over as the head coach. And they went through a bunch of rough seasons. 2 years of Butch Beard, 1 year of John Calipari before they made the playoffs, and actually played fairly well against the Chicago Bulls in the first round that year, competitive in those games, only to fall short. They had legitimate chances, game 1, game 2, and then game 3. You just knew this isn't happening. Jordan and the Bulls are going to advance on. The moral of the story for me was in New Jersey, you never quite felt until Jason Kidd got there that they had a viable team that they could sell in the marketplace, at least when I was with the organization. My first instinct when they left New Jersey to go to Brooklyn was, why? Why are you doing this? Who is this for? Are you trying to convert Knicks fans? Because that's not really a good plan in my eyes.
Yeah.
What I didn't see was the pride factor in Brooklyn and the seeds that they were planting early that 10 years later, you could see the fruits of their labor. So you guys, I'm sure, remember the first couple years in Brooklyn, the Knick Net games, man, it was 80-20 in favor of Knick fans. That's a fair estimate. It was not 50-50. Knick fans were using it as an opportunity to see their team in their town.
That was me. Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. And I get it. 100% get it.
Uh-huh.
As the years went on, I think the numbers leveled off a bit. And the crazy part, and you guys, you're so knowledgeable on your respective teams and the NBA in general. If you remember that stretch of time, the teams were never on the same clock. Mm-hmm. When the Nets were good, the Knicks weren't. When the Knicks had their little push, the Nets were not very good. They just could never seem to get it right. So there was no natural rivalry developing based on their levels. It was only based on the geography, and that hurt the rivalry in my mind. What you've seen now in the more recent years is a little bit more of the leveling off, where the teams are on similar planes. And I think it's going to do wonders for the Knicks-Nets matchup, and also the identity that has formed in Brooklyn. It has changed, and something that I've really noticed just in my own experience, a lot of repeat customers. The first 3 or 4 years, it just felt like people were dabbling. They were testing the market. They were just trying it out. They were sampling, like going to an ice cream shop and trying a couple different flavors and then walking out without actually buying an ice cream cone or a cup. Right. And now I've seen a lot of the same fans, and now I've seen their kids. So a kid that was 14 10 years ago is now an adult and bringing their significant other. It's been pretty wild to watch the transformation. And this is coming from someone who was not convinced it was going to work.
That's great. Yeah, I mean, the Nets did a lot of gimmicks in the early Brooklyn years. I mean, the one game I went to was the Biggie banner, when they put up the banner of Biggie and they had Biggie's white mom there on the court, and Puffy came, and it was just like, it was cool. I mean, I went, and it was cool to see, but it was just like, it seemed a little like you're trying too hard. You know what I mean? So I get that. Yeah,
and I think what we noticed during that time, and Mike can tell you this better than I can because he really felt it. They were completely tossing the New Jersey connection aside.
Right.
Truly. It was a conscious effort. And the last 3 years, something has changed. They have embraced their history more. You'll see guys, Buck Williams and Kerry Kittles and Derek Coleman and Kenny Anderson.
Too. The jerseys also, right? Yeah.
Yes. Otis Birdsong. So going back even to that stretch of time in Nets history. And it's nice to see because there was successful basketball prior to Brooklyn, and it should be celebrated, and it certainly should be remembered. But you nailed it, Alex. In the early going, they went so far the other way to try to pump up Brooklyn as the brand. And now they've settled into, no, it's the Brooklyn Nets. It's not just Brooklyn. It's also the Nets.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's funny because you'll see those jerseys and then I'll have one, right? And it's like, oh, that's so cool. You got that retro jersey. And I'm like,
they're like, no, that's not the retro. That's my actual jersey from back in the day.
Yeah, that's when I was 14. I was like, I got to get this Kerry Kittles jersey. No, so it's cool to see. Alex, go ahead.
No, I was just wanted to transition a little to the Knicks. What are your thoughts on how the Knicks handled the Obi Toppin situation?
Well, it's interesting with drafts because I think draft day in the NBA is the most optimistic day in the league. Every team on that day believes that they've helped themselves. They sell that to their season ticket base. And by the way, they should feel that way. It's one of those moments on the calendar where you can just go off pure speculation and people will run with it. Obi Toppin came out of Dayton. He had his potential March moment ripped away from him because of COVID, and there was no tournament that year. I had a Dayton game that season and saw him and was really impressed with his skill set, his versatility, the inside-outside ability, his explosiveness, and his story. He was not heavily recruited. He was a kid that worked really hard to get to that place. Knicks take him. I think a lot of New Yorkers thought, hey, this really could be a nice fit, great hometown story, the whole 9 yards. It never quite worked. What they needed from him and what he was providing, it's not a three-point shooter. He was trying to be that. The high-flying part of his game, we saw it during moments, but never sustained. And ultimately, it felt like it was going towards a bad ending, at least for me, from my perspective. So obviously it comes to a crashing halt. He's no longer with the team. Ironically, they signed his brother, who I did a number of his games, going back to Rhode Island and then eventually at Kentucky, Jacob Toppin. And he's not going to come in with the same fanfare as Obi, but Jacob's got some game and may find a niche in the NBA. He actually, it's again, a little slow motion in how he goes about his business. And somehow that doesn't really translate to the NBA, but some guys can figure it out. They can get to where they want to get to, even though it doesn't look like they're moving fast. But he's got some ability, and there still might be a Toppin that emerges here with the Knicks. I think GMs always stick to their picks. It's rare that they will ever acknowledge that they made a bad pick. And I noticed that early on, even in my tenure with the Nets. I would talk to executives, and I would, in a professional manner, off the air, ask them, hey, what about this player? What did you see in that player? You signed this player, why? And even if it doesn't work and you see them down the road, they still say, no. See, it wasn't me. The coach didn't use him correctly. They stick with them forever because it's part of their legacy. So I don't know if someone's going to admit a mistake or they're just going to go with the idea it was a bad fit. Yeah,
it's interesting. And I'll just transition for the Jets for a second here, thinking about it, because Zach Wilson's on the Jets roster, and the Jets need a backup quarterback because there's no guarantees with Aaron Rodgers health-wise. But I know a lot of Jet fans clamoring to, have a backup there for a couple of games. And who knows how the story goes with Zach? It's still very early. He's a young guy, but you see it in New York, where Zach Wilson's still on the roster, even when they have arguably top 5 quarterback in the history of the game under center now for the next year plus.
Yeah, so I worked the Jets Carolina game last week, and this came up in our production meeting, just talking it through amongst ourselves. Is there a situation that we can recall in NFL history where a guy is taken really high in the draft of the quarterback position, gets his chance immediately, it doesn't work out, he remains with the team, and eventually gets his chance again with the same team to be the starting quarterback, and then it's successful? And it was hard to come up with.
Smith?
The only one.
Yeah, Alex Smith, maybe, with the 49ers. Was
not a bad one. That's a really good one.
Yeah.
Terry Bradshaw had some down times in Pittsburgh, if you remember. Did it hit rock bottom? Not quite. I watched his documentary, and it was really good. And if you're a Bradshaw fan, he's a great personality. I think they took some dramatic license there. And I look back on the numbers. The team was still winning with Bradshaw in the lineup. They just weren't a really high-powered offense like they wanted him, or they wanted him to play a certain way. Geno Smith, an example of, all right, he makes it with another team, and it's this unbelievable story. There are not a lot of examples. Alex Smith is a really good one. And that was also coach-oriented. I remember Alex with Norv Turner running the show, it was working. He found some things. And then Norv left to take, I want to say, the Chargers head coaching job.
Probably, yeah.
And Mike McCarthy came in to run the offense, and it didn't work between Alex Smith. And this is before McCarthy got the Green Bay job. So there's so many factors that come into it. The reasoning behind Zach Wilson, first of all, financially, it didn't make sense for them to cut him loose. So other than trading him and getting back what's not going to be anywhere near the value of a number 2 pick, and accepting defeat. And as long as Aaron was cool with it, they have a really close relationship. We met with Aaron and we met with Zach last week. And let me tell you, first of all, Aaron Rodgers, the meeting that we had, I've been doing production meetings for 25 years in the NFL, and some guys are really good and some guys are okay. That was among the better production meetings that I can recall in my career. He was that open. He was that direct. He was that honest. You name it, he checked the box in that meeting. And unless he's pulling the wool over everybody's eyes, he really does seem very happy. They haven't played a game yet. So until you play a meaningful game, it can change in a hurry. And then Zach, who I've done maybe 12 production meetings with over the last 2 years between preseason and regular season. It was the calmest I have seen him, and also the most reflective that I have seen him. Humbled a bit, probably, after all of this, but saying the right things, and I think meaning them, not just saying them out of the quarterback handbook, saying them because he's genuine in how he sees this situation playing out. He really is learning more than he ever has. And the fact that Aaron Rodgers can be the guy that's pulling him aside, teaching him about footwork and what you see and how to process and what to look for. It would be an amazing story if the guy ends up in 2 years from now being the starting quarterback and being successful. But I'm not writing it off as something that is not possible. I think it's actually possible. He's got enough talent, and I think he's got the right mindset now to maybe actually do it.
Yeah, and the Jets kind of set him up to fail a little bit. I mean, I wasn't the biggest fan of him coming out because I feel like he came out of nowhere. But they had the rookie offense coordinator, defensive coach. It's just like, how do you expect this kid who's raw from BYU to develop? Yeah. It was kind of all. It was he made his own mistakes though, but it was bizarre.
Fair.
And just to pivot a little bit back to the Knicks, it's kind of connects a little bit with Julius Randle. Speaking of ups and downs in New York. His career starts up with the Knicks low. He's like the consolation prize, and then then he's all-star, and then he falls apart. You know the story. What are your thoughts on Julius Randle? Can he be a 1 or 1B kind of to win a championship with the Knicks? I don't think so, but I want to know what your thoughts are.
You got the little
I had to make sure you knew where I was standing. Yeah.
Just to affect where I was going.
Yeah.
Well, I worked at Miami Knicks series for TNT in the second round of the playoffs this past season. And the narrative at that point was not positive with Randle. He was not 100% physically. His body language was not great. His defense was not great. And there were a lot of people pointing it out on social media time and time again. What are you doing here? Stop it. Focus on Julius with a spot shadow and then show where he should have been. A lot of that was happening around Knick Kingdom. And a lot of it was valid. I personally would not give up on Julius Randle at this stage of the game. I do think that there is some kind of emotional part to his game that fuels him. And whatever that bumpy road was between him and the fans, if there was a disconnect, that can turn. It doesn't take all that much. If the Knicks start winning consistently and he's a part of it, fans will respond and will be positive in their feedback to Julius Randle. If you're asking me, is he 1A, is he 1B to win a title? Probably not. He isn't. If you're asking me, can you win a championship with Julius Randle as part of your team? Yeah, I think you can. But it will require him to maybe see the game through a different lens. And that's going to be the challenging part. Randle has been an alpha. And when the Knicks needed an alpha, he did step forward and he did take on a lot. And I do think Tom Thibodeau appreciates the things that he brings to the table. But there are other parts that he is going to have to secede here a bit, and more so to Jalen Brunson to be the guy. Brunson's the guy right now, and how everything else shapes up will probably go a long way in determining what the Knicks look like here in the 23-24 season.
Yeah, and I'll make an educated guess, Ian, that you called and saw Jalen Brunson play in school and play in college. Is it crazy to see the transformation from, all right, he's a really good college player where he's projected to be late first round, early second round, and then see this maturation where a guy can take over an NBA game? And I'm curious from your brain, because you're seeing the game on two different levels, the college level all the time, and then translated to the pros. What's it like seeing that perspective from you, from he's really good to he's dominating an NBA playoff game and seeing that transformation?
Well, I think, first of all, I've really benefited from the 25 years of doing college basketball. It's helped my NBA work. I do feel like when I'm doing games, I have a better idea, some more insight into these guys, whether it was background information where you feel like you've got a head start because you did the prep work when they were in college, or flat out scouting. Just having an idea of what they do, what they like to do, how they might fit in. I don't pretend to be a GM. I don't pretend to be a player personnel guy. But it is interesting. Years ago, with various people within the Nets front office, I would get questioned. Hey, what do you think of so-and-so? I know you had this team last weekend. What'd you see? And there were times where I thought they were actually listening to what I had to say, not saying they were drafting based on it, but it might be a line that showed up on their scouting report as they prepared for the draft. And that's varied based on who's in the front office and
That's cool.
Also how you deal with them, what level your relationship is based on familiarity and years accrued. The second part, which has more to do specifically with Brunson, he is a prime example of a testament that hard work and being really smart can do you a lot of good in this league. The athleticism, which I think was the question mark with him, and size, whether or not he could do the things he did at Villanova. He was a winner. And sometimes we just see guys that are winners flat out, but you don't know if it's going to translate. Kyle Lowry, another guy who eventually got there in the NBA. Initially, if you remember, Lowry and Kevin McHale had issues in Houston, and he was trying to find his way, worked out better in Memphis, and then he went to Toronto, and it soared. Trust level went up. His confidence level went up. He realized the things he could do and do well. And he didn't have
also,
yeah, and he didn't have to be lightning fast to do it. And even with Brunson, there's a craftiness with him. And look, the other part doesn't mean that every son of an NBA player automatically is smart about the game or knows the game or has a really high basketball IQ. In this particular case, he does. And I think the fact that Rick Brunson was a grinder and had to scratch and claw to make rosters, and had to be a really good guy, by the way, too. Because when you're the 12th to 15th man on a roster, it's not just your playing ability at that point that's going to keep you employed. Do they like having you around? Are you someone that they want on the team? I think Rick Brunson figured that out somewhere along his career. Like, hey, if I'm a good guy and I play hard and I cheer for the other guys and I practice my ass off, could I survive cuts year after year? And I think he did. And there's no doubt that rubbed off on Jalen Brunson. Just that experience of seeing his dad every year fighting to stay on an NBA roster. So there was a work ethic there. And then the jump. I remember I did a few games the year of the contract issue in Dallas with Jalen. And, you want to talk about a metamorphosis. Jason Kidd, who I got to know really well when he was a player, but oftentimes our conversations when I would talk to Kidd when he was playing with the Nets would be NFL based. He was a huge Raiders fan, still is. And he knew if we crossed paths, he would get information from me. Hey, you had the Raiders 2 weeks ago. What's going on there? What's happening there? Do you believe in Andrew Walter, the quarterback? No, I don't. Oh, man, he's a big kid. These were the conversations we were having at the time. So it wasn't really basketball talk. He just knew if he saw me, we could have a legitimate football talk and he would be more informed on his team. And that was a good place for me to be in because it meant we were developing a relationship. He becomes the head coach of the Nets. And I'll be honest, he was very tentative in our meetings initially. We didn't get a whole lot out of him. We'd have meetings outside of the press conference and I'd walk out of there with my pad. And like, he didn't give a shit. And I remember one particular game. It was in Houston. And I'd have to look back on that year. And Mike, you might have a better recollection. So obviously, expectations are really high. Kevin Garnett, Paul Pierce, Jason Terry, they built this team. They're going all in. And it's not going well. There's no continuity. The chemistry is not working. It doesn't seem like they're responding to Kidd, who is just fresh off playing. So that relationship, the dynamic is odd. And we went in for an off-the-record meeting with Jason before he did his media session. And he just unloaded everything that was going on. I was like, oh, wow. Not stuff necessarily to use on the air, but stuff to give us background on what was really happening. And from that point on, he went to Milwaukee after that. I would have a TNT game. He was very good in the meeting. Not the best, but very good. He become a bit more of a share. He gets to Dallas. He's been unreal. I would put him in the top 5. Maybe it's based on our relationship. I have no idea. But he's great, and he's honest, and he's forthright. And he said it in regards to Brunson in the first meeting. I think I had them opening night that year in Atlanta, I want to say. Yeah. It was me and Stan Van Gundy, I believe, doing the game. But I'd have to check the dates. And I asked him about, hey, what's going on, the contract. He's like, hey, look, I've told him, I want you to get paid. If it doesn't happen here based on circumstances, so be it. But you're going to get paid. Go play your heart out. Go do the things we need of you. And I think that was freeing for him. Prior to that, I think he was thinking about the contract. And by the way, he was not thinking he was getting $95 million at that point. And he's right now one of the biggest bargains in the NBA based on the contract, which is amazing because Dallas wasn't willing to go to that $50-55 million range.
Right.
And it changed. It changed his whole perspective. And I just believe he's played freer. And he really now takes advantage of his strengths and he plays to his strengths. It's a great story, and he is fun to watch. And what he was doing in the playoffs, guys, from a play-by-play man's point of view, you just want guys that get in the zone and can't miss. And he went through a few stretches where he could not miss. That means, as a play-by-play guy, your calls are building with each call that he's making a shot. This happened a lot with Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving and Vince Carter going back. But Brunson entered that category for me where I knew I could add a little bit more with each call. 5%, 7%, 10% more. By the time you get to the end and he's exploded, you're at that 90% level of your energy because he's earned it. And you're reacting the same way fans are reacting. I mean, I try at least to be the conduit that you're a reflection of what someone sitting on their couch is feeling watching a game. And the hope is that the soundtrack can match it.
That's fair. And last one on the Knicks, RJ Barrett. What are your thoughts on him, and what do you think his ceiling could be one day?
Yeah, I think he's a really interesting player that probably has been asked to do things that were not necessarily part of his game, because that position that he plays, that's what you have to do in the NBA. And I think we're getting to a point now where it's becoming more positionless basketball, obviously in the league. I used to lay out on my charts, point guard, two guard, small forward, power forward, center, their respective backups. That's how I would visualize a roster. And as I'm doing my prep work now, where you put Kevin Durant isn't exactly set up. And what RJ Barrett isn't exactly something you can put in a box. But the fact that he does not shoot the three with consistency in today's NBA, it hurts. It hurts him. And there is a confidence part. I don't know how you feel, Alex, when you're watching the game. You can sometimes feel it in the way he takes the ball and sets up. There's a consistency that three-point shooters have in how they go about their business and the routine of it. Mike and I saw it with Joe Harris for so many years, trying to mirror that exact same approach. And with RJ, I just noticed that there are just moments where something breaks down in the mechanics of it. And whether it's mental, whether it's physical, whether it's the repetition, whether it's just the comfort zone of it, I don't know what it is, but he can do everything else really well. And I do think he has a will and he wants to be great. What's the ceiling? Could he be an all-star at some point based on his style of play, based on the Eastern Conference? Yeah, I think he could. But I don't know if that's what the ceiling was when he was drafted, of being a one-time all-star. And yeah, that's great. You're an all-star for life. I think the idea when they drafted him, and by the way, look at the rest of that and the problems that went at 1 and 2 that those two teams, New Orleans and Memphis, they're both dealing with right now with Zion and with Ja Morant. RJ has probably been the most consistent guy because guess what? He's been available. He plays. So if you're a Knicks fan, what is it that you visualize? And maybe I'm asking you this, Alec, what is it that you visualize that you need him to be when it's all said and done?
I think he needs to be consistent on defense and be a 20 plus per game scorer. And at this point, the dreams of him being the superstar number 3 pick in the draft, that's going to James Harden, that's going to take over, is gone. I mean, me and Mike had one of our funniest episodes. We were screaming at each other, is that I was calling RJ Barrett a star 2 years ago towards the end of the year when they traded everybody and Randle got hurt. He was like, give me the ball and get the fuck out of my way. I was like, who is this guy? This is the guy. This is him. Right. And then, something went south, and part of it could be Randle, part of it could be Tibbs. I don't know what it is, but sometimes he presses. Now he's like the third option. And when he gets the ball, he just rushes. And I just feel that hinders him a lot because his game is built off having the ball and dishing and dominating the ball for the most part. And it's tough because he doesn't really fit, but a lot of the things on the Knicks don't really fit, and that's why they had to get rid of Obi Toppin, who they give to the Pacers. As a 90s Knicks fan, that hurts my soul. So it's just like, I know what's going to happen there. Halliburton and Obi are going to crush it, so it's just, it just hurts me because I feel like they're a little too much in bed with Randle and Tibbs' relationship, that they're like, this is our team, and Brunson is the nephew of Leon Rose. And it's just like, I love Brunson, don't get me wrong, but like, I feel like it's putting a cap on this. Every team climbs up the mountain. There's something that happens that either puts you on the cap and you're not going to win a championship, or it takes you over the top. Like the Knicks with the Melo era was wasting the amnesty on Chauncey Billups, and then they couldn't get Chris Paul, who wanted to come, amnesty Amari, and etc. So, I'm rambling here, but right now I hope that the cap right now is not being in bed with Julius Randle and shipping out Obi and not letting RJ Barrett go into who he can become. So that's,
I feel like I just poured salt into a flesh wound and it just started bleeding more. If the expectation level is RJ Barrett, can he be a 20-point scorer and play solid defense? Yes. The answer is a definitive yes. Very much capable of that. If you've given up the hope of living up to the draft status, number 3 overall, all around skills, he can dominate the game on both ends, he can become a 25, 27-point scorer, I think we probably are in agreement that that's probably not going to happen.
And you've been so generous with your time. We appreciate it. We'll close out with, Alex is a diehard Jets fan as well. And I'm a Giants fan, but I look at it like from the net lens of the excitement before Durant, Kyrie, in your head going, there's a lot that has to happen right, but there is a chance that I'm going to see something I've never seen in my life.
Yep.
A title. For your perspective, this Jets team, which has the most expectations it's had that I can remember in my lifetime and in Alex's, your viewpoint, you met with Aaron Rodgers and the Jets, your viewpoint on where you see this Jets team's going, and does it lead to that second Super Bowl and first one that Alex has seen?
I mean, Alex is a young man, so I don't feel that bad for
I'm
Alex.
38. I'm not that young. Yeah, well,
I'm young. Yeah. You're young. There's no 4 starting.
There's no 4 yet. Yeah.
You're young. 4. You're a young guy. I think the Jets are constantly striving for relevance, and that's why Mike could relate to some degree that when you're the second team in a market, it can be hard. It can be challenging. And you have a fan base, but you're still looking for more, and you're looking for respect, and you're looking for buzz. And the Nets did that, as we know, with Durant and Kyrie and Harden. Although the three didn't play together very often, it was a constant source of material for national media, even more so in many ways than New York media. The Jets, I don't remember a time, and this is going back a long way, I don't remember a time where more people are talking about them leading into a season than this year. They looked at their team and said, this is the time to do it. This is the time to commit. This is the time to try to get over the top. There's going to be a small window here. They have to do it now. That's the viewpoint I think they had during the offseason. You know, they had a little flirtation with Derek Carr, but ultimately they wanted Aaron Rodgers. They got it done. Nathaniel Hackett was hired, further smoothing over the path to get Aaron Rodgers here. They were talking to Alan Lazard. Amazing. They were interested in Alan Lazard. Well, Alan Lazard ends up with the Jets. Aaron Rodgers is there. Randle Cobb's with the Jets. You know, these are not coincidences. So they knew exactly what they were doing. I think the schedule is really challenging. The first 8 games on their schedule, very tough. Look at the second half of the schedule. On paper, not nearly at the same level as the first half. They got to weather this storm early. They're going to have to deal with some bow and arrows early, and there are going to be a lot of people that are looking to take them out, because what comes with buzz? Target on your back. How it all shakes out with the Jets, I believe they're going to be successful, and that's based on Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers bringing a presence that this team has just not had at that position and in that locker room in general for quite some time. But they got to keep them upright, and the offensive line is going to be the key to the whole equation.
Yeah, there's only 2 times in my life that I felt this way about the Jets. Was in '99 before the Vinny injury, and then the second Rex year. And those are the 2 years where I'm like, wow, we actually can win the Super Bowl. You know, so
I would agree.
It's exciting. Last thing, sort of a fun question. What is more fun for you to do? A New Jersey Nets game when they're winning 10 to 20 games in the season, maybe game, let's say 65, or the final preseason game between the Jets and Eagles a couple years ago?
Oh my goodness. You definitely hit on a very sore spot. That last preseason game, when there were 4 preseason games, that last one, the second half of it, was by far the most challenging hour and 20 minutes of my year. And I hope I'm not speaking out of school. I really do care about the broadcast. I care about them being entertaining. I care about them being informative. I care about the work. I care about the relationship with my analyst, with my producer, director, everybody else on the staff. I care a lot. It's probably the only time all year where I feel like I'm working. Like, this is not my vision of what this job would one day be. And it wasn't based on not giving the players their due. The problem that I realized it probably 15 years ago. We would have these production meetings prior to the final preseason game, and the producer would have all these graphics, and he'd really go hard, focusing in on one player, 2 players, and the player would play well. And we told their story, and this is going to be great because he's going to make the roster. And they always got cut. And then you never heard from them again. And I would feel terrible. Like, we pumped this guy up, and it's the biggest thing going. And I'm not saying, oh, you just never heard from them with the Jets. You never heard from them again in the NFL. And I finally got that particular producer out of that mindset. I said, hey, we got to change our philosophy here. Anyone that's watching at that point, they want to look forward. You got to start moving forward to what's the team going to look like? Why are we focused on roster spot 51, 52, 53? These guys will never play, ever. And by the way, sometimes the guy would text me the next day, see, he made it. And then 2 days later, once the waiver wire hit, he was done. And I would have to text him back, dude, he's out of the league. So we have refocused. The crazy part on the Nets side, Mike will remember vividly, they won 12 games. They won 12 and 70.
Yeah.
And I
John
really,
Wall, right?
yes, I would tell you that I thought it was one of my best years of broadcasting because I had to come up with something interesting and informative and entertaining every game. And I just would not accept defeat that entire year. So if that answers your question, I think you could surmise which one I found more challenging.
Yes, you did.
And I think that, that's what makes you so great and amazing at your job. And listening to all these Nets games is I'll listen to you, RJ, and Sarah, and then be like, oh yeah, the Nets are playing, like you get wrapped in it. Love
Thanks,
listening to it.
Appreciate it.
It's a blast. You're the best. So Ian, thank you for coming on Bad Weather Fans. We really appreciate it, and best of luck for a busy fall coming your way.
All right. Great being on with you guys. Alex, good luck, man. I know
Thanks.
You're banking on this Jet season to lift you out of the abyss. Mike, if you want to continue texting me during games, anything with your cat, I'm cool with it. I enjoy it, and I get back to you pretty quickly. I care about speed. So even if the game is going on, there are times where I'm texting, here's Dinwiddie for 3, got it. And I'm literally hitting send on a text.
That's incredibly impressive. And then also the Barclays Center music playing in the background and incorporating it into the call. And I'll be like, I think that was Barbie World somehow getting into there. I don't remember. I don't know what the calls were now, but I'm like, there definitely was the music added in there. I'm like, yeah, that definitely just happened. I love those.
That matters to me, Mike. I do not get a set list before the game. So to me, again, this is very similar to the spillage thing. If the song is playing behind a particular possession and I just lay out, I don't say anything for 5 seconds, and the song is going on and on in the middle of an NBA possession, I find it so entertaining that is the soundtrack. So if I could incorporate it into a call, give a little wink to someone that's also paying attention, I think that's a win for everybody.
Yes. Yeah. No, those deep cuts.
It is a game.
Megan the Stallion remarks are coming on broadcast.
I became a Megan the Stallion expert based on my rudimentary knowledge of her work, but enough that I could connect songs. And and I honestly, I just tried to make Sarah Kustok laugh, and she has a laugh. She can't contain it.
Yeah.
So if I can get her to that stage, she has to hit the cough button, and Frank DeGrace in the truck will then, chime in and like, yep, you got her again. We've lost her. So that's also part of the objective.
Beautiful. Ian Eagle, thank you so much for coming on Bad Weather.
All right, guys. Yeah, my pleasure.
Thank you.